Picture this. You're standing at the gates of one of the most secure military installations in the country. Armed guards block your path, their faces stern and unwavering. "Ma'am, you can't pass," they declare with absolute authority. But what they don't know is that the woman they're stopping isn't just anyone. She's about to become their new commanding officer, the first of her kind to break through barriers that have stood for decades. This is the story of Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a woman whose journey from a small-town girl with big dreams to a groundbreaking military leader would challenge every assumption about who belongs in positions of power. It's a tale of persistence against impossible odds, of proving herself in rooms where she was never supposed to exist, and of the moment when respect had to be earned one salute at a time. What happens when the very people meant to follow your orders don't even recognize your right to give them? This is that story, raw, real, and absolutely true. Sarah Mitchell had always been different. Growing up in the small farming town of Cedar Falls, Iowa, she was the girl who climbed the tallest trees, outran the boys in her grade, and spent her evenings reading military history books instead of romance novels. Her father, a Vietnam veteran turned high school principal, noticed early on that his daughter possessed something special, a natural leadership quality that seemed to emerge in every situation she encountered. The first real test of Sarah's character came during her sophomore year of high school. The school's JROTC program was struggling with low enrollment and poor morale. Most students saw it as an easy credit, a place to coast through without much effort. But when Sarah joined, everything changed. She didn't just participate. She transformed the entire culture of the program. Within months, she had organized the first successful fundraising campaign the unit had seen in years, coordinated community service projects that got the local newspaper's attention, and somehow convinced half the football team to take drill practice seriously. Her JROTC instructor, Sergeant Major Reynolds, was a tough man who had served 3 tours in the Middle East. He didn't hand out praise easily, but he saw something in Sarah that reminded him of the best officers he had served under. "Mitchell," he would say, "you don't just follow orders, you understand them. There's a difference, and it's bigger than you think." He began giving her additional responsibilities, treating her not like a student playing soldier, but like someone who might actually make a career out of this. The real turning point came during the state JROTC leadership competition. Cedar Falls High had never placed higher than 7th in the 10 years they had been participating. The competition was fierce, with schools from Des Moines and Iowa City bringing teams that had been training year-round with professional coaches. Sarah's team was made up of farm kids and small-town teenagers who were just figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives. But Sarah had a plan. She had studied the competition format for months, analyzed the scoring system, and identified exactly where they could gain an advantage. While other teams focused on perfect uniform appearance and flawless drill movements, Sarah realized that the leadership scenario portion was worth 40% of the total score, and most teams barely prepared for it. She spent weeks creating realistic scenarios, running practice sessions that pushed her teammates to think on their feet, and developing a communication system that would give them an edge when the pressure was on. The day of the competition, Sarah's team arrived looking less polished than their competitors. Their uniforms were clean but not crisp, their boots were shined but not mirror perfect. The other teams looked at them with barely concealed amusement. This was going to be easy. But when the leadership scenarios began, something remarkable happened. Sarah's teammates responded to every challenge with confidence and creativity. They communicated clearly under pressure, adapted to changing situations, and supported each other in ways that impressed even the judges. When they announced that Cedar Falls High had won first place, the silence in the auditorium was deafening. Sarah's team had not just won, they had dominated, scoring higher than any team in the competition's history. As she stood on the stage accepting the trophy, Sarah felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about a high school competition anymore. This was about proving that leadership had nothing to do with where you came from or what people expected of you. Her father was in the audience that day, and as they drove home through the Iowa countryside, he asked her a question that would stay with her forever. "Sarah, what do you want to do with this gift you have?" She looked out the window at the endless fields and small farmhouses, then back at him. "I want to serve, Dad. I want to lead people who matter. I want to make a difference where it counts." He nodded slowly, understanding that his daughter had just made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. Senior year brought new challenges and new opportunities. Sarah was elected student body president, captain of the debate team, and valedictorian of her graduating class. But more importantly, She had begun to understand something fundamental about leadership that many people never figure out. It's not about being in charge. It's about taking responsibility for the success and well-being of others. Every decision she made, every project she led, every conflict she resolved taught her something new about what it meant to serve others effectively. The college decision was actually easier than everyone expected. While her classmates agonized over which school had the best parties or the prettiest campus, Sarah had already narrowed her choices down to institutions with strong ROTC programs. She wanted to continue developing her leadership skills while getting the education she needed to serve at the highest levels. After visiting several campuses and talking to current cadets, she chose the University of Iowa, partly because of their excellent military science program, but mostly because of what she saw in the eyes of the cadets she met there, the same hunger for excellence and service that she felt in herself. The summer before college was spent preparing in ways that her friends couldn't understand. While they worked summer jobs and enjoyed their last few months of freedom, Sarah was running 5 miles every morning, studying military history and tactics, and volunteering with the local emergency management agency. She knew that college ROTC would be more demanding than anything she had experienced in high school, and she was determined to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Her mother worried that Sarah was pushing herself too hard, missing out on the typical teenage experiences that she would never get back. But Sarah's focus was unwavering. She had seen what mediocrity looked like, and she wanted no part of it. Every morning when she laced up her running shoes, every evening when she opened another book on military strategy, she was building the foundation for something bigger than herself. She didn't know exactly what that would look like yet, but she knew it would require everything she had to give. The night before leaving for college, Sarah stood in her childhood bedroom looking at the walls covered with awards, certificates, and photographs from 4 years of high school leadership experiences. Her father knocked on the door and came in carrying a small wrapped package. Inside was a compass that had belonged to his father, who had served in World War II. "Every leader needs to know which direction they're heading," he said simply. "But, more importantly, they need to help others find their way too." Sarah held the compass in her hands, feeling its weight, understanding that this was more than a family heirloom, it was a responsibility. As she packed her bags that night, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. From a small-town girl with big dreams to a young woman ready to take on challenges she couldn't even imagine yet. She had learned that leadership wasn't about titles or recognition. It was about service, sacrifice, and the willingness to stand up when others couldn't or wouldn't. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she was ready to face it head-on. The drive to Iowa City the next morning was quiet, filled with the kind of thoughtful silence that comes before major life changes. As the campus came into view, Sarah felt a familiar mixture of nervousness and excitement. This was the next step in a journey that she sensed would take her places she had never imagined. The girl from Cedar Falls was ready to become something more, ready to test herself against new challenges and higher standards. What she didn't know was that the path ahead would be far more difficult than anything she had faced before, but also more rewarding than she could possibly imagine. College hit Sarah like a freight train, but not in the way she expected. The academic work was challenging, but manageable. She had always been a strong student. The physical demands of ROTC were tough, but not overwhelming. Her years of preparation had paid off. What caught her off guard was the subtle but persistent message that she didn't belong. Not from her professors, who were generally supportive, and not from the ROTC instructors, who judged everyone by the same high standards. The resistance came from her fellow cadets, particularly the male students who had grown up assuming that military leadership was their birthright. The first incident happened during her 3rd week on campus. Sarah had scored highest on the initial physical fitness test and second highest on the first academic exam in military science. As she was leaving class, she overheard 2 of her male classmates talking near the door. "She's just trying too hard," one of them said. "Wait until we get to the real stuff. She'll wash out like they always do." The other one laughed and added, "My dad says they only let women in because of politics. She'll figure out she doesn't belong soon enough." Sarah felt her face burn with anger and embarrassment, but she kept walking. That night, alone in her dorm room, she called her father. Through tears of frustration, she told him what had happened, how isolated she felt, how unfair it all seemed. His response was not what she expected. "Sarah," he said gently, "did you think this was going to be easy? Did you think that just because you wanted to serve, everyone would welcome you with open arms? The question isn't whether this is fair. The question is whether you're tough enough to prove them wrong. That conversation changed everything for Sarah. She realized that she had been fighting the wrong battle. Instead of trying to fit in and be accepted, she needed to focus on being undeniably excellent. If her presence made some people uncomfortable, that was their problem to solve, not hers. Her job was to be so good at what she did that their opinions became irrelevant. The transformation began immediately. Sarah started arriving at PT formation 15 minutes early, not just on time. She volunteered for every extra duty, every additional training exercise, every leadership opportunity that came up. When her squad was assigned to plan a field exercise, she didn't just participate. She created detailed maps, backup plans, and contingency scenarios that impressed even the upper-class cadets. When they were learning land navigation, she didn't just complete the course, she finished first, and then went back to help struggling classmates find their way. But the real test came during the fall field training exercise. The scenario was designed to simulate a combat leadership situation where cadets would be rotated through different command positions under stress. Sarah knew this was her opportunity to show what she was really capable of. When her turn came to lead, she was given what everyone recognized as the most difficult scenario, a night mission with incomplete information, limited resources, and a tight timeline. As Sarah studied the map and received her briefing, she could feel the eyes of her classmates on her. Some were hoping she would succeed, but many were clearly waiting for her to fail. The scenario involved leading a squad to locate and secure a simulated crash site in rough terrain while avoiding enemy positions and getting the survivors to safety before dawn. Previous groups had struggled with the time constraint, and two had failed completely when they got lost in the darkness. Sarah took her time with the initial planning, ignoring the whispers about how she was overthinking it and trying to be too perfect. She studied the topographical map until she had memorized every ridge and valley, identified 3 possible routes to the objective, and calculated exactly how much time each phase of the mission would require. When she briefed her squad, her instructions were clear, specific, and left no room for confusion. Each person knew their role, their backup role, and what to do if communication was lost. The mission began at midnight. Sarah led from the front, navigating by compass and terrain association through terrain that looked completely different in the darkness. When they encountered their first simulated enemy position, she quickly adapted, leading her squad on a flanking route that avoided contact while staying on schedule. When one of her squad members fell and twisted his ankle halfway to the objective, she made the difficult decision to leave 2 people with him while continuing the mission with a reduced team rather than abort or fall behind schedule. At the crash site, Sarah's planning paid off perfectly. Her squad quickly secured the area, located the simulated survivors, and began the evacuation process exactly as rehearsed. But then, the real test began. The scenario controllers threw them a curveball that no previous group had faced. They announced that one of the survivors was too badly injured to walk and would need to be carried, and that enemy forces were moving in their direction, cutting off their planned extraction route. Sarah had 30 seconds to make a decision that would determine whether her mission succeeded or failed. She looked at the map, calculated the distances and time remaining, and made a choice that surprised everyone. Instead of taking the direct route back to base, she decided to head deeper into enemy territory, using a longer but more concealed route that would take them around the enemy forces while giving them cover for carrying the injured person. For the next 2 hours, Sarah led her squad through some of the most challenging terrain on the training area. They moved slowly and carefully, taking turns carrying their simulated casualty, communicating with hand signals, and stopping frequently to check their position and listen for signs of enemy movement. Several times they had to change course when patrol routes brought them too close to enemy positions. Sarah's confidence never wavered, and her squad began to trust her completely, following her lead even when the route seemed to take them farther from safety. When they finally reached the extraction point just 20 minutes before the deadline, the evaluators were stunned. Not only had Sarah's squad completed the mission successfully, but they had done it without being detected by any enemy positions and had gotten everyone out safely, including the difficult casualty that had been thrown at them as a last-minute complication. The senior instructor, Colonel Peterson, pulled Sarah aside after the debrief. "Cadet Mitchell," he said, "in 15 years of running this exercise, I've never seen a first-year student handle that scenario with that level of composure and tactical thinking. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the ROTC program. The whispered comments about her not belonging stopped, replaced by grudging respect from some and genuine admiration from others. But Sarah knew that one successful exercise didn't change everything. She had won a battle, not the war, and there would be many more tests ahead. The rest of her freshman year passed in a blur of increasing responsibilities and escalating challenges. Sarah was selected for the drill team, chosen to represent the university at a regional leadership conference, and nominated for a summer training program that typically only accepted upper-class cadets. Each success brought new opportunities, but also increased scrutiny from those who still questioned whether women belonged in military leadership roles. The most significant moment came during the spring awards ceremony. Sarah had performed consistently well throughout the year, but she wasn't expecting to be recognized for anything major. When they announced that she had been selected as the outstanding freshman cadet, the applause was polite, but not enthusiastic. As she walked to the stage to receive the award, she could see the mixed reactions in the audience. Some genuine smiles, some polite clapping, and some faces that clearly conveyed the message that this was political correctness run amok. Colonel Peterson handed her the trophy and leaned in close as they shook hands. "Cadet Mitchell," he said quietly, "there are people who think you got this award because you're a woman. I want you to know that you earned this because you're the best cadet we have. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Sarah nodded, understanding that this recognition came with both honor and additional pressure. She was no longer just representing herself. She was carrying the hopes of every young woman who dreamed of military service and the skepticism of everyone who doubted they belonged there. That night, Sarah called her parents to share the news. Her mother cried with pride, and her father's voice was thick with emotion when he told her how proud he was of what she had accomplished. But it was something her father said at the end of the conversation that stayed with her. "Sarah, you've proven that you can compete with anyone and win. Now the real question is what you're going to do with that ability. The easy thing would be to coast on this success. The hard thing would be to use it as a platform to lift others up too." Sarah understood that her journey was just beginning, and that the real test of her leadership would come not in competing with others, but in inspiring them to be better than they thought possible. Sarah's sophomore year began with new responsibilities and higher expectations. She was appointed as a squad leader within the ROTC battalion, responsible for mentoring freshman cadets and helping to plan training exercises. This was her first real taste of military leadership, and she quickly discovered that being in charge was far more complex than she had anticipated. It wasn't enough to be competent herself. Now she had to help others reach their potential while maintaining the high standards that had gotten her to this position. Her squad included 12 freshman cadets, 8 men and 4 women. The dynamics were complicated from the start. Some of the male cadets clearly resented taking orders from a woman who was barely a year older than they were. Some of the female cadets expected her to go easy on them because of shared gender. Sarah quickly realized that she couldn't treat everyone the same way and expect good results. Effective leadership required understanding what motivated each individual and adjusting her approach accordingly. The first major test came during a field exercise where Sarah's squad was tasked with establishing a defensive perimeter around a simulated forward operating base. The scenario was designed to test not just tactical knowledge, but leadership under pressure. Sarah had planned meticulously, assigning specific sectors to each fire team and establishing clear fields of fire and communication protocols. But when the simulated attack began, everything fell apart. 2 of her team leaders froze under pressure. One cadet abandoned his position without permission, and her radio operator lost communication with headquarters at the worst possible moment. Standing in the middle of chaos, with simulated artillery rounds exploding around them, and her carefully planned defense crumbling, Sarah felt a moment of pure panic. This was nothing like the clean, controlled scenarios she had excelled at before. Real leadership, she realized, happened not when everything went according to plan, but when nothing did. She took a deep breath, grabbed her backup radio, and began issuing clear, calm commands to reorganize her squad's defense. Working with what she had instead of what she had planned for, Sarah quickly identified her most reliable people and put them in key positions. She moved the frozen team leaders to less critical roles and gave leadership responsibilities to cadets who were performing well under pressure. She established new communication protocols when the primary system failed and adapted her defensive plan to match the reality of the situation rather than sticking to her original idea. By the time the exercise ended, Sarah's squad had not only held their defensive perimeter but had actually improved their position by identifying and exploiting weaknesses in the simulated enemy attack. More importantly, several cadets who had struggled earlier in the semester had stepped up and performed beyond everyone's expectations when given the chance. The after-action review was overwhelmingly positive, but Sarah was more interested in what her cadets had learned than in the praise from the instructors. That evening, as her squad cleaned their equipment and prepared to return to campus, one of the freshmen who had initially been most resistant to her leadership approached her. "Cadet Mitchell," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. I didn't think you could handle leading us in a real situation. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Sarah nodded, understanding that this moment represented more than just one cadet's change of heart. It was proof that respect could be earned through performance, even when it wasn't freely given. The recognition of Sarah's leadership abilities came from unexpected quarters. Professor Williams, who taught military history and had served as an infantry officer in Iraq, asked her to stay after class one day during her junior year. "Cadet Mitchell," he said, "I've been teaching here for 8 years, and I've seen a lot of promising young officers come through this program. You have something special, the ability to think clearly under pressure and to inspire others to perform better than they thought they could. Have you given any thought to what branch you want to serve in after graduation?" Sarah had been thinking about this question for months. The traditional paths for women officers were in support branches like logistics, military intelligence, or medical services. These were important roles, but they weren't where Sarah saw herself making the biggest impact. She wanted to serve in a combat arms branch, leading soldiers in the most challenging and demanding environments the military had to offer. But she also knew that this path would be far more difficult, with more barriers and more resistance from those who questioned whether women belonged in combat leadership roles. "Sir," she said carefully, "I want to serve where I can make the biggest difference and where the standards are highest. I'm not interested in the easy path." Professor Williams nodded thoughtfully. "The infantry is opening up to women officers now, but it won't be easy. You'll face challenges that your male counterparts won't have to deal with, and you'll have to prove yourself over and over again. Are you prepared for that?" Sarah's answer came without hesitation. "I've been preparing for that my entire life." The application process for infantry officer training was grueling. Sarah had to meet not just the academic and physical standards, but also pass additional evaluations designed to assess her leadership potential under extreme stress. The physical fitness requirements were significantly higher than anything she had encountered before. The academic component required mastery of complex tactical scenarios and detailed knowledge of weapons systems, small unit tactics, and battlefield medicine. Sarah threw herself into preparation with the same intensity she had brought to every previous challenge. She was running 8 miles every morning before classes, spending her evenings in the gym working on strength training, and studying tactical manuals late into the night. Her social life disappeared entirely, but she didn't care. Every sacrifice felt like an investment in a future that was bigger than her own personal comfort. The summer training program between her junior and senior years was designed to identify the future leaders of the Army. Sarah was one of only 3 women in a program of 45 cadets, and she knew that every aspect of her performance would be scrutinized more closely than that of her male peers. The training took place at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and consisted of 6 weeks of increasingly challenging leadership exercises designed to push every cadet to their breaking point. The first week was pure physical and mental exhaustion. Sarah found herself getting up at 4:30 in the morning for physical training, spending all day in tactical exercises, and staying up until midnight studying for the next day's evaluations. The pace was relentless, and several cadets dropped out before the first week was over. But Sarah not only kept up, she began to excel, quickly establishing herself as one of the top performers in the program. The breakthrough moment came during the 3rd week, in an exercise called the Crucible event. Each cadet was given command of a platoon of role-playing soldiers and tasked with completing a complex mission involving multiple objectives, time constraints, and deliberately introduced complications. Sarah's scenario involved leading her platoon through urban terrain to locate and neutralize a high-value target while minimizing civilian casualties and avoiding friendly fire incidents. What made the exercise particularly challenging was that the role-playing soldiers were actually experienced NCOs who had been instructed to test each cadet's leadership style and decision-making ability. They would follow orders if the cadet demonstrated competence and confidence, but they would become increasingly uncooperative if they sensed weakness or uncertainty. Many cadets had failed this exercise when their soldiers lost confidence in their leadership and stopped following orders effectively. Sarah approached the exercise with a strategy she had developed over 3 years of ROTC training. Earn respect through competence, maintain authority through consistency, and inspire performance through example. When she briefed her platoon on the mission, her instructions were clear and detailed, but she also took time to explain the reasoning behind her decisions and to ask for input from the experienced NCOs. This approach immediately established her credibility and showed that she valued their expertise while maintaining her authority as the leader. The mission itself was a masterclass in adaptive leadership. When the platoon encountered unexpected resistance at their first objective, Sarah quickly modified her plan, using the terrain to her advantage and repositioning her squads to maintain momentum without exposing them to unnecessary risk. When one of her soldiers was designated as wounded, she smoothly executed casualty evacuation procedures while continuing to advance toward the primary objective. When intelligence reports changed the location of the target, she adapted her approach without losing time or compromising security. Throughout the entire exercise, Sarah maintained communication with her squads, provided clear guidance when situations became complex, and made decisive decisions when speed was more important than perfect information. Her soldiers responded with increasing enthusiasm and cooperation, following her orders quickly and efficiently. By the time the exercise ended, Sarah had not only completed all primary objectives ahead of schedule, but had also accomplished 2 of the 3 bonus objectives that most cadets never even attempted. The debrief was unlike anything Sarah had experienced before. The senior instructor, a colonel who had commanded infantry units in both Iraq and Afghanistan, was genuinely impressed. "Cadet Mitchell," he said in front of the entire group, "that was one of the finest displays of small unit leadership I've seen from a cadet in this program. You demonstrated tactical competence, adaptive thinking, and the ability to inspire soldiers to perform at their best. Those are the qualities we're looking for in our future infantry officers." But it was what happened after the official debrief that meant the most to Sarah. The NCOs who had played her soldiers approached her as she was cleaning her equipment. "Ma'am," said the senior sergeant, a veteran of multiple combat deployments, "I've done this exercise with dozens of cadets over the years. You're the first one who treated us like professionals instead of just obstacles to overcome. That's the difference between someone who can give orders and someone who can actually lead soldiers." Sarah felt a surge of pride and validation that was deeper than any award or recognition she had ever received. The final weeks of the summer program flew by in a blur of advanced tactical exercises, leadership evaluations, and preparation for the transition to active duty. Sarah consistently performed in the top tier of cadets, earning recognition not just for her individual achievements, but for her ability to help struggling classmates improve their performance. By the time the program ended, she had established herself as one of the most promising future officers in her class, regardless of gender. The flight home to Iowa gave Sarah time to reflect on how much she had changed over the course of her college years. The girl who had arrived on campus 4 years earlier with big dreams and small-town confidence had been transformed into a young woman ready to lead soldiers in the most demanding environments the military could offer. But she also understood that the real test was still ahead. Everything up to this point had been preparation. Soon, she would be responsible for the lives and welfare of real soldiers in real situations with real consequences. The thought was both thrilling and terrifying, but she knew she was as ready as she could possibly be. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell reported to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, on a humid morning in June 2018, carrying everything she owned in 2 duffel bags and a footlocker. The 101st Airborne Division was legendary in military circles, known for producing some of the finest infantry leaders in the Army. As she walked across the sprawling base for the first time, Sarah felt the weight of history around her. This was where some of America's most decorated soldiers had trained and served, where legends were made and legacies were born. Her assignment was to Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 327th Infantry Regiment, a unit with a proud combat record stretching back to Vietnam. The company commander, Captain Rodriguez, was a combat veteran with 3 deployments under his belt and a reputation for being tough but fair with his officers. When Sarah reported to his office for the first time, she could see him sizing her up, trying to determine whether this young woman was ready for the responsibilities she was about to inherit. Lieutenant Mitchell, he said after reviewing her file. You've got impressive credentials from college, but this is the real Army now. You're going to be responsible for 36 infantry soldiers, most of whom have more combat experience than you do. Some of them have been deployed multiple times, seen real combat, lost friends. They're going to test you in ways that no textbook or training exercise ever could. Are you ready for that? Sarah looked him straight in the eye and replied, Sir, I'm here to learn from them and to earn their respect through my actions. I know I have a lot to prove, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes. Sarah was assigned to 3rd Platoon, a mix of seasoned NCOs and younger soldiers who had been together for over a year. The platoon sergeant, Staff Sergeant Johnson, was a 12-year veteran who had served in both Iraq and Afghanistan. He was the kind of NCO who could make or break a new lieutenant. If he supported her, the platoon would follow. If he didn't, her leadership would be undermined from day one. Sarah knew that earning his respect was crucial to her success as a platoon leader. The first few weeks were a careful dance of establishing authority while demonstrating humility. Sarah made it clear that she expected high standards and professional behavior, but she also showed that she valued the experience and expertise of her NCOs. She spent time learning each soldier's background, strengths, and challenges. She participated in every training exercise, every physical fitness session, and every maintenance detail, showing that she wouldn't ask her soldiers to do anything she wasn't willing to do herself. The real test came during a major training exercise at the Joint Readiness Training Center in Louisiana. The exercise was designed to simulate the complex, multifaceted challenges that infantry units faced in modern warfare: counterinsurgency operations, urban combat, humanitarian assistance, and peacekeeping missions all rolled into one intensive 2-week scenario. Sarah's platoon was tasked with establishing security for a forward operating base, while conducting regular patrols in a simulated Iraqi village populated by role-playing civilians and insurgents. On the 4th day of the exercise, Sarah's platoon was conducting a routine patrol when they received intelligence about a possible improvised explosive device on their planned route. The scenario controllers had designed this situation to test how well new lieutenants could make quick decisions under pressure while managing the safety of their soldiers and the mission requirements. Sarah had to choose between 3 options: abort the patrol and return to base, take a longer alternate route that would use more resources and time, or send a small team ahead to investigate the threat while keeping the rest of the platoon in a secure position. Sarah gathered her squad leaders and asked for their input, but ultimately the decision was hers to make. After considering the intelligence, the terrain, and the capabilities of her soldiers, she chose a 4th option that none of the scenario controllers had anticipated. She decided to split her platoon, sending one squad on the alternate route to continue the patrol mission while she personally led a small team to investigate and clear the suspected IED location. This approach allowed them to maintain their patrol schedule while addressing the threat, but it also required her to take personal risk and trust her squad leaders to operate independently. The plan worked perfectly. Sarah's team successfully located and cleared the simulated IED, while the rest of her platoon completed their patrol objectives on schedule. More importantly, her decision to personally lead the dangerous mission earned immediate respect from her soldiers. Staff Sergeant Johnson later told her, "Ma'am, you could have made the safe choice and just avoided the problem. The fact that you were willing to put yourself at risk to get the mission done shows us the kind of leader you are." Sarah understood that this moment had established her credibility in ways that months of routine training never could have. Word of Sarah's performance during the exercise spread throughout the battalion. Senior officers began taking notice of the young lieutenant, who was excelling in one of the most demanding leadership positions in the infantry. But recognition brought new challenges and increased scrutiny. Sarah found herself being assigned to more complex missions and given additional responsibilities that tested not just her tactical skills, but her ability to handle multiple competing priorities under pressure. The most significant test came when her company was selected to participate in an international training exercise with British and Canadian forces. Sarah's platoon was chosen to work directly with a British infantry section, requiring her to adapt her leadership style to work with soldiers from a different military culture with different procedures and traditions. The exercise scenario involved a complex peacekeeping mission in which coalition forces had to maintain security in a volatile region while facilitating humanitarian aid distribution and training local security forces. Sarah approached this challenge the same way she had approached every other difficult situation in her military career, through preparation, professionalism, and respect for others' expertise. She spent hours studying British military procedures and terminology, learning about their equipment and tactics, and understanding the cultural differences that might affect how the two units work together. When she met her British counterpart, Lieutenant Davies, she was ready to discuss not just the tactical aspects of their mission, but also the nuances of coalition warfare and international cooperation. The exercise proved to be one of the most complex and demanding training scenarios Sarah had ever experienced. The coalition forces had to navigate not just military challenges, but also cultural sensitivities, language barriers, and differing national objectives. Sarah found herself serving not just as a platoon leader but as a diplomat, liaison officer, and cultural interpreter. Her ability to build relationships quickly and find common ground between different groups became as important as her tactical decision-making skills. On the final day of the exercise, Sarah's combined American-British team was tasked with executing a high-risk mission to evacuate civilians from a contested area while maintaining security and avoiding international incidents. The scenario required precise coordination between the two units, real-time adaptation to changing conditions, and flawless communication under extreme pressure. Sarah and Lieutenant Davies had to work together seamlessly, each commanding their own soldiers while supporting the overall mission objectives. The mission was a complete success, accomplished ahead of schedule with no casualties and minimal collateral damage. But what impressed the exercise evaluators most was the way Sarah had managed to build such effective cooperation between two different military units in just 2 weeks. The senior British officer, Colonel Thompson, made a point of speaking with Sarah after the final debrief. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, "in 30 years of military service, I've rarely seen such natural ability to bring different groups together for a common purpose. That's a rare gift, and one that will serve you well as you advance in your career." Sarah's performance during the international exercise led to her selection for the Army's Advanced Infantry Officer Course, a program designed to prepare the most promising young officers for company command and higher leadership positions. The course was intensely competitive, accepting only the top 5% of infantry lieutenants Army-wide. Sarah was not only accepted but was one of only 2 women in a class of 45 officers. The advanced course pushed Sarah harder than any training she had experienced before. The academic component covered advanced tactics, strategic thinking, leadership theory, and international relations. The practical exercises involved commanding larger units, managing complex multi-phase operations, and making decisions with incomplete information under extreme time pressure. Sarah excelled in every aspect of the course, consistently ranking in the top tier of her class and earning recognition from instructors who had trained some of the Army's most successful combat leaders. But perhaps the most significant moment of the course came during a leadership seminar where officers were asked to discuss the challenges they had faced and overcome in their careers. Sarah spoke about the barriers she had encountered as a woman in a male-dominated profession, the extra scrutiny she had faced, and the pressure to prove herself repeatedly in situations where her male colleagues were given the benefit of the doubt. Her presentation was honest, thoughtful, and devoid of self-pity, focusing instead on how these challenges had made her a stronger and more empathetic leader. After her presentation, several male officers approached her privately to share their own perspectives and to acknowledge that they had never fully understood the additional challenges that women officers faced. One captain, who had initially been skeptical about women in combat roles, told her, "Lieutenant, your presentation opened my eyes to things I had never considered. I want you to know that you've changed my mind about what effective leadership looks like." Sarah realized that her journey was about more than just her own success. It was about opening doors and changing perceptions for all the women who would follow. Upon completion of the advanced course, Sarah was promoted to captain and assigned as the executive officer of Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, 506th Infantry Regiment, another unit with distinguished history and high standards. The position would prepare her for company command while giving her broader experience in staff planning, resource management, and training development. More importantly, it would test her ability to support and advise a company commander while managing the complex logistics and administrative requirements that kept an infantry company mission-ready. The company commander, Major Williams, was a veteran of multiple combat deployments who had earned a reputation for developing exceptional junior officers. When Sarah reported to her new position, he was direct about his expectations. Captain Mitchell, this job is going to prepare you for company command, which is the most important leadership position in the infantry. Everything you've done up to this point has been preparation for leading a company in combat. We're going to push you hard, give you real responsibilities, and expect you to perform at the highest level. Are you ready for that challenge? Sarah's response was immediate and confident. Sir, I've been preparing for this opportunity my entire career. I won't let you down. Colonel Sarah Mitchell stood outside the gates of Fort Braxton on a crisp October morning in 2023, watching the morning shift change unfold with practiced precision. At 38 years old, she had spent the last 15 years building a reputation as one of the Army's most capable and innovative leaders. Her path from small-town Iowa to this moment had been marked by consistent excellence, groundbreaking achievements, and the kind of quiet professionalism that earned respect from soldiers and civilians alike. The phone call from the Pentagon had come 3 weeks earlier. The voice on the other end belonged to General Patricia Hayes, the Deputy Chief of Staff for Personnel, and her message was both an honor and a challenge. Colonel Mitchell, congratulations. You've been selected to take command of the 3rd Brigade Combat Team at Fort Braxton. This is a career-defining assignment, and, frankly, you're making history. You'll be the first woman to command an infantry brigade in the division's history. Sarah had accepted immediately, understanding that this opportunity represented not just personal achievement, but a breakthrough for every woman who dreamed of military leadership. The weeks between her selection and arrival at Fort Braxton had been filled with intensive briefings, transition meetings, and preparation for taking over one of the Army's most elite combat units. The 3rd Brigade had recently returned from a successful deployment in Eastern Europe, where they had worked with NATO allies to strengthen regional security and deterrence capabilities. The unit had a stellar reputation for tactical excellence and innovative training methods, but they also had a strong traditional culture that valued experience, competence, and proven leadership above all else. Sarah's predecessor, Colonel James Patterson, had commanded the brigade for 2 years and was highly respected by both his soldiers and his peers. He had agreed to spend a week with Sarah during the transition, sharing insights about the unit's strengths, challenges, and key personnel. Colonel Mitchell, he had told her during one of their private conversations, this brigade is filled with exceptional soldiers who will follow any leader who demonstrates competence and genuine concern for their welfare. They don't care about your gender, your background, or your politics. They care about whether you can make the hard decisions, lead them through difficult situations, and bring them home safely. Show them that you can, and they'll follow you anywhere. The transition ceremony was scheduled for the following Monday, but Sarah had asked to spend the weekend before getting familiar with the base and observing the daily routines of her new command. She wanted to see how the brigade functioned when they didn't know their new commander was watching, to get a sense of the culture and morale before she officially took charge. It was during this reconnaissance that the incident at the gate occurred. Sarah had been visiting the brigade's motor pool to observe Saturday morning maintenance operations when she decided to walk back to her temporary quarters through the main gate. She was wearing civilian clothes and carrying a simple shoulder bag, looking more like a visitor than a senior military officer. As she approached the security checkpoint, she reached for her military ID card, expecting the routine identity verification that was standard procedure for anyone entering the base. The young soldier manning the gate booth looked to be barely out of basic training, probably assigned to security duty as part of his initial job training. When Sarah handed him her ID card, he glanced at it quickly, then looked at her with obvious confusion. He checked the card again, looked at Sarah, then at the card once more. His partner, a slightly older soldier with corporal stripes, came over to see what was causing the delay. "Ma'am," the corporal said after examining Sarah's ID, "I'm going to need to see some additional identification. This card shows you as a colonel, but..." He trailed off, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but uncertain about how to proceed. Sarah realized what was happening. These young soldiers had never seen a woman with her rank and couldn't reconcile what they were seeing with their expectations of what a senior officer should look like. "I understand your confusion," Sarah said calmly, reaching into her bag for her orders and additional identification. "Here are my permanent change of station orders and my dependent ID card. I'm Colonel Mitchell, and I'll be taking command of the 3rd Brigade on Monday." The two soldiers examined the documents carefully, conferring in whispers while other people in line began to grow impatient with the delay. That's when the situation escalated. A staff sergeant who had been watching from nearby approached the checkpoint with obvious irritation. "What's the hold up here? he demanded, looking at Sarah with suspicion. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside while we verify your identity. You can't pass until we confirm who you are. The implication was clear. He didn't believe that the woman standing in front of him could possibly be a colonel in the United States Army. Sarah felt a familiar mixture of frustration and determination wash over her. This was not the first time her authority had been questioned based on appearance, and she knew it wouldn't be the last. But the timing was significant. In less than 48 hours, she would be responsible for leading over 3,000 soldiers, including the 3 men who were now questioning her right to enter the base. How she handled this moment would set the tone for everything that followed. Sergeant, Sarah said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that comes from years of command experience. I appreciate your diligence in checking identification. Security is everyone's responsibility, and I'm glad to see soldiers taking it seriously. However, I am Colonel Sarah Mitchell, and these are my orders assigning me as the new commander of the 3rd Brigade Combat Team. I suggest you contact the officer of the day to verify my identity if you have any doubts. The staff sergeant looked at the documents again, clearly struggling with cognitive dissonance between what he was seeing and what he expected. Other soldiers had begun to gather around the checkpoint, curious about the commotion. Sarah noticed that some were pulling out their phones, probably to record what was becoming an increasingly awkward situation. She realized that her response to this challenge would be witnessed and discussed throughout the brigade within hours. At that moment, a familiar voice cut through the tension. Colonel Mitchell, good morning, ma'am. Sarah turned to see Command Sergeant Major Rodriguez approaching the gate with a wide smile. He was the senior enlisted leader of the 3rd Brigade, a man with 25 years of experience and a reputation for excellence that was respected throughout the division. His presence immediately changed the dynamics of the situation. Rodriguez, Sarah replied warmly, extending her hand for a firm handshake. It's good to see you. I was just doing a little reconnaissance before Monday's ceremony. The Command Sergeant Major nodded approvingly, then turned to address the soldiers at the checkpoint. Gentlemen, he said in a voice that carried unmistakable authority, I'd like you to meet Colonel Sarah Mitchell, your new brigade commander. She's one of the finest officers I've ever had the privilege of serving with, and you're about to learn what real leadership looks like. The transformation was immediate and complete. The staff sergeant snapped to attention, his face flushed with embarrassment. Ma'am, I apologize for the delay. Welcome to Fort Braxton. The 2 younger soldiers echoed his greeting, clearly mortified by their mistake, but also curious about this woman who would soon be their commanding officer. Sarah accepted their apologies graciously, understanding that this moment was an opportunity to demonstrate the kind of leader she intended to be. No apology necessary, Sarah said to the gathered soldiers. You were doing your jobs, and I appreciate your attention to security. In fact, I'm impressed that you took the time to verify identification rather than just waving people through. That's exactly the kind of diligence that keeps everyone on this base safe. Her response immediately defused the tension and turned what could have been a negative first impression into a positive interaction. Word of the gate incident spread through the brigade with the speed that only military gossip can achieve. By Sunday evening, everyone from private to lieutenant colonel knew that their new commander had handled an awkward situation with grace and professionalism. More importantly, they had learned something crucial about Sarah's leadership style. She didn't use her rank to intimidate subordinates or to deflect responsibility from others. Instead, she used challenging situations as opportunities to build relationships and demonstrate her values. The change of command ceremony on Monday morning was attended by over 2,000 soldiers, family members, and distinguished guests. General Hayes had flown in from Washington to officiate, and the division commander had made it clear that this was a significant moment in the Army's ongoing evolution. As Sarah stood before the assembled crowd to accept the brigade colors from her predecessor, she was acutely aware of the historic nature of the moment and the weight of responsibility that came with it. In her remarks to the brigade, Sarah spoke about honor, courage, and commitment, the Army values that had guided her throughout her career. But she also talked about something more personal, the importance of seeing beyond surface appearances to recognize the potential and value in every soldier. Each of you has been entrusted with the defense of our nation, she told the assembled troops. My job as your commander is to ensure that you have the training, resources, and support you need to succeed in that mission. But more than that, my job is to see the best in each of you and to help you achieve things you didn't know were possible. After the ceremony, as Sarah mingled with soldiers and their families during the reception, she was approached by the young soldier who had been working the gate on Saturday morning. He looked nervous but determined as he waited for an opportunity to speak with her privately. "Ma'am," he said when they finally had a moment alone, "I wanted to apologize again for Saturday. I've never served under a female colonel before, and I didn't know what to expect. I hope I didn't offend you." Sarah smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Son, you didn't offend me at all. You were doing your job, and that's exactly what I want from every soldier in this brigade. The only thing I expect from you going forward is your best effort and your commitment to the team." As the reception wound down and Sarah prepared to head to her new office for the first time as a brigade commander, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the girl who climbed trees in Cedar Falls to the colonel taking command of 3,000 soldiers, every step had been preparation for this responsibility. The challenges ahead would be significant: maintaining readiness, training new soldiers, adapting to evolving threats, and leading a diverse organization in an increasingly complex world. But Sarah also knew that she was ready for those challenges. She had proven herself at every level of leadership, earned the respect of soldiers and officers throughout her career, and developed the skills and judgment necessary to succeed in this demanding role. More importantly, she understood that her success would help pave the way for other women who aspired to military leadership, just as the example of others had inspired her own dreams years earlier. That evening, alone in her new office, Sarah looked at the photographs and certificates that decorated the walls, testament to the achievements and history of the leaders who had commanded this brigade before her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new tests of her leadership abilities. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction and gratitude for the opportunity to serve at the highest levels of her profession, knowing that the best was yet to come.